Welcome to an episode of Crimes Notes. If you're watching this, it means that you've done 2-1 through 2-5, which is one step, two-step, multi-step, variables on both sides, all kinds of solving. So now we're going to talk about how to apply those solving things to word problems. So the first thing you're going to do is your two problems on your own. The first one is solving, so you will get x equals something at the end. The second one is translating. Okay, and then we'll move on to how to do word problems. So I've got 4 steps here for you. The first of those steps is going to be to define the variable. In other words, what are you looking for? Number 2 would be to use that to set up an equation. And then once you have the equation, you're going to solve the equation. And then you're always going to answer the question with a sentence. In other words, with word problems, when you get to the end, you always want to make sure that you've actually answered the question. Okay? So, that being the case, let's take a look at this first problem. It says the larger of two numbers is 23. If 3 times the larger number is 5 more than 8 times the smaller number, find the smaller number. So our first step is to define the variables, and I've kind of helped you out. Off to the side, I've given you an L and an S. Those are our 2 variables. Defining them does not mean tell me what they equal. It actually means in words, what do they stand for? So L is going to stand for our larger number, and S is going to stand for our smaller number. So now we want to kind of start reading. Our first sentence says the larger of 2 numbers is 23. Well, I know the 2 numbers are my larger number and my smaller number, which means the larger number is 23. Well, is represents an equal sign. So the very first thing that I know is that L equals 23. So we're not sure what to do with that information, but we know that we've got it. So now we're going to start reading. 3 times, so we use our dot, the larger number. Well, the larger number is L, so we're just going to put L. Is, that's our equal sign, 5. More than means to add, but then remember this is also one of our switch words. If it has a than or a from, we have to switch. And then 8 times the smaller number. Well, the smaller number is S. Find the smaller number. So I have an equation here, 3 times L. I'm just going to write that as 3L equals 5 plus 8 times S. Well, that's just 8S. Then I've got to switch it. So this and this need to switch places. So I'm going to go this direction just because I need room to solve. So if I put the first part, because I'm not going to do anything with that, 3L equals, 8S plus 5, because that's what it looks like once I switch it. So now I've defined my variable, I've set up an equation, now I need to solve the equation, but I can only solve if I have one variable. Well, I know that L is 23. So if I replace L, 3 times 23 equals 8S plus 5, this is an equation that I should be able to solve. So if I do 3 times 23 in my calculator, okay, I would get an answer, and then you guys could move this around and solve it. So 3 times 23 is 69. Equals 8S plus 5. I guess I should have made these boxes a little bit bigger. So here's my line. So I would have to subtract 5 on both sides. So I'm going to move, well, I'll put it here first. So 64 equals 8S. So I'm going to put it over here. 64 equals 8S. So now if I divide by 8, I get S equals 8. So now I've solved the equation, but remember it says answer the question with a sentence. Well, the question says find the smaller number. So I would say the smaller number is 8. And again, it doesn't have to be like a paragraph, just a simple sentence. Okay, good. So now let's move on to the next one and see what we come up with. Okay, I'll probably start setting them up and letting you solve them since we've already done a lot of practicing on that. Okay. All right, so the next problem says Mr. Powell travels 24 miles to work every day. The difference between the distance Mr. Clay travels in 6 days and the distance Mr. Powell travels in 5 days is 96 miles. How many miles does Mr. Clay drive to work? So I've already kind of told you our two things are Mr. Clay and Mr. Powell, but it's how many miles. So this is the miles to work for Clay. And this is the miles to work for Powell. Well, that very first sentence tells us that Mr. Powell travels 24 miles to work every day. So they told us that P was equal to 24. So now we have to look at our equation, the difference. So we're going to be subtracting the distance Mr. Clay travels in 6 days from the distance Mr. Powell travels in 5 days. So Mr. Clay, so the miles that he travels in 6 days, so 6 times however many miles he travels to work, so 6C, minus 5P should equal 96 miles, because this is the difference, so we're subtracting Mr. Clay minus Mr. Powell. Okay, so now we know what P is. It's 24. So we've defined the variables, we've set up an equation, now it's time to solve. So 6C minus 5 times P should be 96. So then we would be ready to solve. So 5 times 24 would be 120. So 6C minus 120 has to equal 96. So then we would add 120 to both sides. So 216, so I have 6C equals 216. And again, that's what I would have gotten here. These would have canceled, bring this down. So then if I divide by 6, I get 36. So then the final step is to write that sentence, and I'm going to let you do that. And you can either write it here or here. It says, how many miles does Mr. Clay drive to work? So you would say, Mr. Clay drives 36 miles to work every day. Okay, so that would be the sentence that you're looking for. All right, so problem number 3, I'm going to get less and less. Notice I didn't give you the variables this time. It says an air conditioning system salesperson earns a base yearly salary of $38,000 and earns a commission, which means we're adding to our salary, of $500 for every air conditioning system sold. How many air conditioning systems must be sold to earn $45,500? So to pick out what we needed to have variables for, remember we went to the question, how many miles? Well, since that was the question, we knew that's what our variables had to represent. So same thing on this problem. It says how many air conditioning systems. So I'm going to use A for number of air conditioning systems. I'm going to change it to AC systems because it's shorter to write. And then we're talking about our earnings. So our E would stand for our earnings. So those are the two things that are in the question. So, and then it says we want our earnings to be 45,500. So they already told us that E equals 45,500. So we've defined our variables. Now we actually want to start to set up the equation. So it says the air conditioning system salesperson earns. So his earnings are 38,000 and, which typically means add, and this. So he's earning more. So that means we're going to add. If it said and spends, then we would do subtraction. So whatever comes after this and kind of gives you your hint. So this would be plus $500 for every. That's the same as for each or per, which we said means to multiply. So we multiply times each air conditioning system. Well, now we know what E is. So I want you to take this 45,500 and I want you to put it in here for E. So you would have 45,500. That's what we want his earnings to be, would equal 38,000 plus the 500A. And I want you to go through and solve that, and don't forget to write your sentence. Okay? All right, number 4, I want you to try to set it up yourself and see if you can't solve it. At a movie theater, children's tickets, people age 12 and under, cost $5 each, and adult tickets, people age 13 and older, cost $8 each. The movie theater made $480 in ticket sales in one night. Remember, that's our total. So anytime we have a total, that's going to be on the other side of the equal sign. So our total was 45,500. On this one, our total was 96 miles. Okay? So anytime that you've got a total, that's what's going to be on the other side of the equal sign. Then you've got to use these other numbers. So the $8 for adult tickets and $5 for children's tickets. And then remember, they both say each, so you're going to have to multiply. And then it says how many adult tickets were sold if 16 children's tickets were sold. So you know your two variables, adult tickets and children's tickets. And they already told you that the number of children's tickets was 16. So you should have A for adult tickets. You'll have C for, well, A is for the number of adult tickets. C would be the number of children's tickets. And then you would already know that C equals 16. Okay, so you've got all the pieces of it. I want you to see if you can set it up and solve. If you have any questions, please make sure you ask, and I can help you with this one before you actually answer it on the video. Good luck!